Welcome back to a family business podcast. For all of you amazing people watching us on YouTube, things look different. It looks like a pregame presser. Ask us all your questions, format them in a way that you want. But we've got a pretty interesting topic today.
I just want to talk about this ray of sun shining between Brad and I. It's like something's coming down from the heavens. Do you see that?
It's beautiful. A little controversial. You know, we kind of were thinking that something like this was going to happen at some point, but it's here. And so let's jump into it. Let's share our opinions and dive right in.
So the most recent discussions on like several places on Housing Wire and a couple pods have talked about this is the Florida buyer that was ordered to pay $24,000 after breaching their EBA agreement with their agent. And it wasn't technically the agent that sued the buyer. It was the broker owner. The name of the company was Echo Fine Properties. Jeff Lichtenstein, that's a name. He decided to sue this buyer who went ahead and purchased a property with another agent when he was under a exclusive buyer's agency agreement with one of Mr. Lichtenstein's. Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Lichtenstein's agents. So this is a interesting topic because this didn't just happen. It was just awarded. I don't remember, pretty recently here, but this was actually the lawsuit happened in December of 2024, right? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It looks like the article was written December 17th anyway.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly. We could dig in here, but I know that the infraction, is that the right word, happened at the end of December 2024, and then obviously there was the lawsuit. So how do we all feel about this? I thought I had pretty strong feelings about this. And then after listening to it and researching more, now I don't know. I feel like I kind of am 50-50. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Should a broker or an agent sue a buyer that doesn't perform on their agreement or violates the contract? And maybe we need to back it up for a minute, just for those of you that might be listening that aren't up to speed, which as of August of 2024, NAR implemented mandatory buyer-broker agreements as part of the commission lawsuit that happened, the settlement. So as an agent, you cannot work with a buyer, and a buyer cannot work with an agent unless you have a buyer-broker agreement signed in advance. Most of these have commission, how you're getting paid. It's basically transparency, right? It's outlining the duties of the buyer's agent to the buyer and what the buyer is responsible for to the buyer's agent. So in this particular situation, there was a agreement on file. Apparently this agent had been assisting this buyer. And then for whatever reason, I don't know that we know all those nitty-gritty details. I'm sure they're available somewhere. He decided to purchase property with another agent, and they were alerted, which is the very interesting part, by the mortgage lender who the buyer was working with, got the contract from the second buyer's agent. And then it, was going to close. And he told the first buyer's agent that these people had went under. And my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys, my understanding though is that the mortgage lender first went to this other agent and this buyer and said, hey, just this, you're under contract with someone else, this is a legally binding contract, you're going to have to pay this other agent. And basically the buyer and the buyer's agent didn't care. That's my understanding of how it went down. So what are your thoughts?
The first thing is, it's quite interesting because I think we've experienced it ourselves, is that lenders, are asking more and more for these exclusive buyer representation agreements, probably for compliance on their end, to make sure they have all the boxes crossed off. I'm sure they're seeing buyer's agent service fees compensation come across the board in multiple different ways. And so they have to control it probably to the best of their ability. So with that being said, these agreements just can't be put in a file and basically kind of just kept on the down low and away from multiple different sources where this issue can come out and find that, now there's two parties with the same agreement. So that's quite interesting. We're seeing that quite a bit more across the board. This is a whole rabbit hole, right? I mean,
it's such a rabbit hole.
We probably don't know what conspired fully, but my biggest thing, the word I wrote down, is communication. I mean, when we go through the agreement, first of all, we sit down and make sure that we are face to face when we talk about this agreement, because we know that these situations have happened and can happen. We present it in a way that, hey, this is what our side of the relationship is supposed to hold up and your side of the relationship is supposed to hold up. So there's no issues like this down the road, whether it was intentional or not. With that being said, there had to be a break in the communication somewhere.
Yeah. I'm just going to go on record as no, you don't sue clients, but let me explain where I'm coming from there, because I would agree with PT that a lot of agents are not very transparent from what I've heard of these exclusive buyer agency agreements. So a lot of these people don't even know what they're signing. And, there's been debates whether you let them know that this is a legally binding contract or not. I mean, I would really think that most people understand that when they sign a contract, it's a legally binding contract. But I will say that the way that I would handle things is I would call the other agent and explain that you're in a contract with them, or call the client and explain. And there's only so much that you can do, that at the end of the day, if you sue somebody, you're probably going to get bad reviews. Number one, even if you're in the right. So you're really not going to win in the end. And then also that buyer, you've lost them the rest of your career, and probably everybody that they know as well. So whether you were right or wrong.
Well, but here's one of the interesting points, and I don't disagree with what you're saying, and I don't disagree with what you're saying, PT, but here's a couple interesting points in this. And number one, so these buyers, obviously in this particular situation, the case states, so they purposely switched the offer into somebody else's name, like a family member or something, because they thought they could avoid paying the first buyer, or I'm sorry, the first broker, buyer agent. So clearly they knew they were doing something wrong. Because if they didn't know they're doing something wrong, then they would have just written the offer and then done what you said, play dumb, or literally been like, well, I didn't understand it that way. It wasn't explained to me, which there are certainly agents that don't explain it. I mean, it's still happening. We're still seeing that. We're still hearing about it, where it's just slipped in with an offer instead of what should happen, which is the agent sitting down and having that buyer consultation, making sure that they fully understand the agreement. And if that didn't occur, okay, but clearly in this situation, the person knew they were doing something wrong. So that's my thing. I agree that you don't want to get into the habit of suing people, but I think the flip side of that is, I mean, do you have a contract? Do you not have a contract? Right? And why do we have a contract? If you're, Brad, you, and I know this is a little bit different, but why it's no different than a purchase agreement, right? Is that there's a purchase agreement. Like, I'll go back to our situation. We had a situation a few years ago where we had an agreement on a house. Our buyer was purchasing a home. They were selling their other home. Like, I don't know, a week or two before closing, the other agent called and said, hey, my seller is not going to sell anymore because now he can't buy the other home he was planning to buy because of whatever issue. And the problem with that is nowhere in the contract had that listing agent or that seller noted that him selling the home or closing on it was contingent upon him finding a home. Yep. So we still had a valid contract. And I remember you saying to that other agent, literally, and I quote, because the agent said, well, you're not going to hold me this contract, are you? And what did you say, Brad?
It's a contract, not a love letter.
So I do feel a little of that, right? Like, and I feel like, yes, as agents, we need to be holding each other up to higher standards in regards to making sure that the communication is there and how we're explaining that contract. Also, I mean, if you've spent a year with someone, and this is where I go. Let's say that you've worked with a buyer for a year, a solid year. You've shown them 100 properties. You've answered every question. You've run every scenario. You've presented multiple offers for them. And it really has just been, not the right house, haven't got it for the right price, or they've been competing. And then all of a sudden one day, their friend Billy says, oh, my buddy Joe is going to sell his house, but he doesn't want to pay a realtor. So, why don't you buy it, but you don't need to use your realtor? Okay. So in that situation, you just say, okay, you don't owe me any money, and I don't deserve to be paid for my services. Like, I get not suing someone, but that's the whole reason that person knows they're doing wrong by doing that. And yes, you can take the high road, but if that's what we always do, then what do the buyer's agency agreements even mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, and it's a very tough topic. And I just, at the end of the day, I'm just not going to sue clients.
Well, it's not your client anymore because he didn't use you.
And here's the other question too. And I don't know the background on the service that was provided either. I mean, typically speaking, I mean, we used to always say back before the law change that there's no reason that we need to lock these people up into this contract, that they're not going to go anywhere if we end up taking care of them. So I guess maybe that's my mentality, which may not be the right mentality, but it's one of those where you would just hope that they would by the contract. I mean, that does kind of tell you a lot about the person if they don't.
There's so many different angles to consider in this too. We talk about the number of realtors across the United States that do 0 deals, that do 1 deal, right? So is this a person that spent a whole year with this person and this was potentially a check that was going to put food on the table, right, for their family? And so you consider that. I wrote down, how much or what amount is worth taking those actions. And so maybe in this person's eyes, that was the number for them. So it's such a fickle situation to consider. And from my perspective now, taking these situations, going through these buyer consultations, reviewing these buyer representation agreements, you have to consider and have that honest conversation up front before you get to this. Because what we talk about too, there's just people that have had a bad experience in the past with someone shoving the agreement in front of them, not explaining it to them, and they understand after the fact, and they don't want to sign that agreement again. So, I can understand that from their perspective. And then there's just people that don't want to sign agreements. So, and we come from the ideology that we don't want to work with people that don't want to work with us. So there's just so many different ways that you can avoid this situation. And instead of just rushing to get the agreement done, you'll avoid an entire lawsuit from the jump.
Well, and maybe it's just that when you get it signed that, just explain this is a contract between you and my brokerage, and explain that, I don't know if you want to start off a relationship like this, but it is a contract, and that if they don't fulfill, there's a way to say this, their end of the bargain, that it's kind of out of your control, that it's up to the broker really. Correct. Whether they want to go after the compensation.
Yeah, and we can only say so much at some point, that, hey, we're not going to come after you and sue you, but we can't guarantee that our broker has the same thought process as us.
That's exactly
right.
Well,
Well, and I think we talked about this in a previous podcast. We alluded to this, but so I have 2 things to comment on, and I don't disagree. I would never want to sue like someone in the public. I don't think that's a good look at all. But I also think that if you've done everything right, and again, PT, you're right. We weren't in this situation. We weren't the buyer. We weren't the buyer's agent. We don't know. But if you know you've done everything right, and someone legit just does it, which in this situation sounds like they did because they switched names on the contract. To me, I just think that that's just wrong. And I get your whole thought process, but that's just wrong. And we actually had that happen. And we chose not to go after it. But our broker told us we could have. Flat out. And the reason why it happened to us is because the particular buyer who at the time was looking at homes and had been looking at homes, and we had worked with this client several times, but they'd been looking at homes, but they couldn't purchase a home until they sold their home in another state. And so they were making offers contingent upon the sale of a home, and that was never happening. Well, while this was happening, we had another buyer in a similar price point that we started working with, that there was nothing on the market that person was interested in. So they had us, look at some off-market properties, and you did a tour and one that they were interested in, which you contacted, and the seller was interested in selling. So our new buyer ended up writing an offer on that. Well, apparently that other buyer who couldn't buy something or wouldn't buy something without selling their property in another state got wind of the fact that property had went under contract, and went under contract with us as the buyer's agent. And they were mad about that. Well, the wife was, or whatever, I don't know. And so they then decided that, they weren't going to tell us they were mad about it. They just were going to go and basically one up us, I guess is what I would say. And so they actually purchased a home, and they used another name. I think it was the mother-in-law or something is who they wrote the contract in, thinking they could avoid the buyer's agent agreement. And this was a massive paycheck, and someone we'd worked with for a long time. So we could have definitely sued them. And I think the broker would 100% got the case. We chose not to, because in that situation, I think it was just weird, right? Whether it was right or wrong. I think it was wrong on their part. But I could kind of understand the frustration, but then not. There's all kinds of variables in that deal. So that I can understand. But also on the flip side of that, Brad, was what you just said a minute ago. If you remember, before there was even buyer's agency agreements, we had a client that we'd worked with for a long time that had looked at lots of properties, that ended up a property that we had shared with them that they bought that wasn't also not on the market. They were connected directly to the seller, who flat out told them that, hey, yeah, I'll work with you on this price, but I'm not paying an agent. and then called us and said, oh, we really wish we could pay you for your time, but the seller doesn't want to pay you. So
Yep, we've had a few of those. Yep.
So in that, we didn't do anything wrong. I mean, the client said, I feel bad. Well, you feel bad. Well, we don't work for free. I mean, do you work for free? I mean, that's the hard part of it. And the bigger thing I think I would say is, I think this lawsuit is just the tip of the iceberg. I think you're going to see them on both sides.
Well, and it comes down to what exactly you were saying, Andrea. Where is the line in the sand? What is a contract, right? What is a valid contract, and what can you do to either get out of a contract, or where are the grounds for somebody to hold somebody to a contract, right? And maybe from this perspective too of this agent is that, hey, we can't let this slide. We can't let this be something that becomes wind, that people just can get away with breaking a legally binding contract. And they wanted to set some type of precedence too.
That's a hard part right there.
Now that's out there. So maybe, just maybe, with cases like this that do go to court, and we're not the guinea pigs of suing the people, that buyers realize that this is a real contract, and that if you violate the contract, part of the risk is that you may have to pay the entire commission, or you probably will, that there's now precedence that you will have to. So maybe it'll become like the listing contract, which has been around for a really long time. So I think sellers totally get that. I mean, I have not run into in 25 years, I have not run into a
26
seller.
now, Brad.
Almost 26. I have not run into a seller that, ends up selling their house to somebody off market and the real estate company not getting the commission. So part of that reason is it's been around for so long. So when you ask the question, would you or would you not? I would not, but I'm not saying that they are right. What I'm saying is I wouldn't sue, but that does not mean that they're not in the wrong.
Well, and not that we joke about this, but page 3, section 12 on our exclusive buyer's agency agreement, page 3 has some things that, when we start to explain them to potential clients, they're like, really? Like that happens? Section 12 talks about assignment of buyer, and what we were just talking about right now with people switching names or to LLCs and so forth. There's a reason why it's on the paperwork, because it's happened somewhere, and this is a prime example of that.
Yeah. I think too, this is what I think will be interesting, is to see how many of these, how many more of these come to light, because I think you're going to see more, especially if it's like in areas where you do have like repeat offenders and the brokerage just gets sick of it, right? Because again, going back to it's not the agent's choice, it's the broker's choice. But I also think it'll be interesting to see if you have the reverse, right? So like, let's say that you're a buyer and you were in an buyer agency agreement with someone, and let's say you lost multiple homes. Like, let's say that, you were trying to buy a specific home and 3, 4, 5 of them sold, either that you didn't get a chance to see, or, for whatever be it, then will you see it where the buyer is turning it around on the buyer's agent and going after them for damages because they feel they didn't uphold at their end of the contract?
100%. I mean, there are listed out items, and we always explain these are the, basic things that a realtor should be doing, but they could be easily passed over, that someone's not responding in a time frame, someone's not using their skill or use holding their information confidentially, right? So a lot of these things, I mean, you could flip the coin over on the same thing for realtors, is that you could probably go down a list and check off, oh, I don't feel that they did this, now can we go after our agents for not representing us?
Yeah, and I really think that's why it's important too, like right off the bat on that contract, it does have that either party can cancel the contract within X amount of days. And if you're not filling that out, that's your own fault.
Well, and here's the thing though.
In my opinion.
So going back to this, so why then did this buyer not just request a cancellation of the contract? I don't understand that, because like you said, that is a possibility, right? And going back to that, I mean, I agree with you 100%, Brad, and I know you feel the same way. PT is like, I mean, we're not going to hold, if somebody doesn't want to work with us, we don't want to work with them anymore, right? Like, and we've always been that way with everything, because it goes back to what you said. I mean, if you take care of them 9 out of 10 times, they're not going anywhere, right? If you're doing your job. But I think the lesson, as I'm sitting here listening, we're debating this. And again, I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. I think you're going to see so many more of these lawsuits. And I really am, at the end of the day, when I heard about this first right before Christmas on a podcast and then started doing a little research, I was absolutely floored that the brokerage was awarded the commission in this. So it tells you there must have been some really, really good paperwork, and the files were really as they should be. And really there was some it really was not a good situation. But what I was going to say is that what it's taking me back to, I think though, is our kind of old adage that we've said for quite some time now. I mean, if you don't feel comfortable with somebody as an agent, then don't work with them.
Right.
Like, even if they will sign a contract, I mean, there's been people, or not, that we've been like, they're happy to sign a contract, but it doesn't mean we want to work with them. Like, you know, you really need to, you're really in a relationship with that person. And if you're both not wanting to enter into that relationship in a positive manner, then just don't be in a relationship with them. And then this isn't really something that you should have to worry about.
Agree. And I mean, going back to your point here, though, I'm not surprised that they won the lawsuit. I mean, DOJ required that this all had to happen. So, I mean, there is a actual mandate that you have to have these agency agreements. And if the court wouldn't have upheld this case, then what are they worth?
Well, and to continue on that as well, I mean, there are specific rules within this agreement as well, what we have to do for the consumer. So not only once they sign it, we have to deliver in a certain amount of time to them for their personal files. So they must have done everything correct, which everybody should be doing, right? If they probably checked off all the boxes, I mean, how could you not just sit there and say, you know, this is a contract. We're going to take it as seriously as a legally binding contract, and you followed all the rules that you're supposed to do for it.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that on the EBA, I would have to pull one up, but on the last page, it says this is a legally binding contract.
Yep, it sure does.
Contact your attorney if you have any questions. Basically, I'm paraphrasing that part. But that was the whole point of the DOJ thing, was that they wanted clear expectations between buyers and sellers and clear compensation. They wanted clarity there, and that's why NAR, and that's why we've got in our local board of realtors, that's why we've got this form that spells out everything step by step. So I'm just going to go back to, I wouldn't sue, but I am saying that what the buyer did was completely wrong, and I'm not surprised that they lost a court case.
Communicate. If you don't want to be in a contract, this is what I always talk to too. I mean, if at some point in this relationship that you don't feel, one, that I'm doing my job, or two, you know, this isn't the relationship for you to help you purchase a home, just call me. You know, I'm not going to, you know, smear your name across the area or just throw a fit about it. We're going to let you out, and we're going to do it the right way.
Yeah. And I think, just to echo on that too, is like, I mean, at the end of the day, going back to what you said, PT communication, I mean, one of the other things that I think is to be considered and maybe isn't communicated properly is that I don't know that everyone truly understands how realtors get paid. I think that they think that there is some compensation from their broker. I think they get paid X, Y, and Z or whatever. But, you know, obviously, as we know, that's not how it works. And that is their livelihood. So maybe also making sure that the buyer understands, because this is my big thing with the buyer agency agreements and why I like them, is that before, it's like you were doing it and if you were doing your job, you assumed that you would, you know, get paid when you found the person, the property, and it closes, right? So that's how it was. Well, now it's like, okay, I love the fact that I'm explaining to someone that this is how we get paid. And if I do my job, then you're going to pay me, right? But I think that it always was in the back of your head, like, do I want to dedicate all my time and effort to this person that I need to help them find, especially if it's a needle in the haystack? And I think the buyer's agency agreement, as a buyer's agent, makes you feel a little more comfortable in the fact that you are maybe overturning extra stones and doing extra things above and beyond, because you know you're going to be paid. Whereas maybe in the past, an agent, although they're working for their buyer, maybe they're not working as hard as they could have, because there was in the back of their head, am I actually going to get paid? I have to make sure that I have other buyers that I'm taking care of, because, you know, for some people, it is how you put food on the table, right? So I think there's that part of it, that maybe if it's just explained better to the buyer, then maybe they wouldn't. You know, I mean, if you're a creepy person, you're a creepy person.
Yeah.
Right?
And you might just have an out of control buyer that signs contracts of all sorts, not necessarily just real estate, but anything, with no expectation of abiding by the contract. We all know people like that, right? So you never know.
Do you remember we had one pretty early after the lawsuit where another agent on our team, that they had a buyer's agency agreement with a client, and the client messaged him and said he wanted to make an offer on a property, and he said, okay, well, I haven't looked at this property with you. And then that's when the person said, oh, I looked at it with blah blah blah, my wife called him or whatever. And so anyway, the moral of the story in that situation is what you just said. Like, I mean, we contacted the other broker, and what
they
ended
paid
up
a referral.
yeah, there was a referral fee that was paid to. I mean, and at the end of the day, the biggest thing, at least on our side of it, we just didn't want there was a language barrier in that specific situation, and we just didn't want the client to feel uncomfortable. And as long as they were taking care of it, they'd found the house. We felt that between the two brokers, that two agents or whatever, that we could, come to common ground, and we did. And that's really the right way to handle it in those situations. But in this particular lawsuit that this discussion started about, it seems like it was intentional of what they did. So
100%. I mean, when you're writing contracts in somebody else's name, that you did something wrong, right? I mean, that's clear as day. But I mean, going back to it, what these people did was completely wrong, and I would have ruled that. And I'm not a judge, but I would have ruled that they were in default of this contract. I'm just saying that, due to the long-term picture, that I wouldn't sue, that I just don't want my name being involved, number one, with lawsuits, and number two, just out in the general public as this agent might potentially sue you. And I know that you would be completely in the right, but there's right, and then long term there's wrong for you, and I just think that I just wouldn't sue. So that's my opinion.
Isn't it unfortunate though that we live in a world with like social media and all those things,
yes,
that like you're afraid that some keyboard warrior is going to trash your name when you didn't do anything wrong? Correct. I mean, that's also what's a little crazy about all this too, is that even though it's right, I mean, and you're getting screwed, and potentially like you just aren't going to do anything about it because you're worried about your reputation, which is just crazy to me, but I get it.
But and also in my opinion though, if you have a little bit of worry or concern about that, there's probably a reason for it. And if you truly believe that, the service that you put out, how you represent your clients is the right way, then there should be, not a review should bother you or anything like that. I'm always the believer, if you're looking over your shoulder, there's probably a reason.
Yeah, exactly.
You didn't feel comfortable, goes back to you didn't feel comfortable, you shouldn't have signed the agreement and got into a relationship with that buyer. So
agree.
I think we all agree on that, but it will be interesting because I bet you we're going to have another discussion about these. I just feel like this is
I think this is great precedent, so right. I mean, so now if you have these people out there that are borderline like, well, I mean, these don't really mean anything. Now we know that they do, so maybe that might make those people think twice about doing that.
And let's be clear too, for those of you, the crazy thing for this particular buyer, they'd already paid their other agent who they wrote the contract with. This was an additional $24,000 that they had to pay to the original brokerage. So it's kind of crazy. So, let us know what you think. We're curious. So, drop some comments, reach out. I mean, I'm curious. I've seen a couple Facebook groups and stuff discussing this whole thing too, which is kind of interesting to hear everybody's opinions. And
yeah, it's a very interesting topic and debate.
It's a very interesting topic. And again, I think we're going to have more examples to talk about in 2026, unfortunately.
Cool. Well, that does it for us. Peace.
Peace.